The examination room kept time better than any clock. Lights pulsed in a slow sequence that matched the ship's artificial circadian cycle, and the diagnostic cradle adjusted its gravity by fractions of a percent as if it were breathing. The human xenobiologist stood at the console, fingers moving from habit more than thought, calling up readouts that hovered in the air like obedient ghosts. Routine, safe, boring. Exactly the kind of moment where mistakes like to hide. Muscle density within expected parameters, he said aloud, mostly so the recorder wouldn't accuse him of silence later. The ship systems were judgmental like that. The woman in the cradle watched him without blinking. Her expression was calm, almost lazy, though the sensors insisted her heart rate was doing something far more athletic. She shifted one arm, the restraints loosening automatically as the system recalculated how much force it would take to be polite versus how much it would take to fail. The xenobiologist's gaze followed the motion for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. That was the mistake. He felt it before he realized it, an internal lurch, the mental equivalent of tripping on a flat floor. His thoughts stalled, then scrambled as his brain performed a frantic audit of itself. No, that wasn't professional interest. That was something else, something old and embarrassingly human. The lights flickered, reacting to a microspike in neural activity from the human side of the room. The woman's lips curved upward. "So," she said, her voice smooth through the translator implant, "you find my physique attractive." The silence that followed could have been classified as a hazardous environment. He coughed. The console beeped, offended by the interruption. That would be an incorrect interpretation of. Her grin widened, not predatory, curious. Almost delighted. Your pupils disagree, also your breathing, also your microexpressions. You have a very expressive left eyebrow. He glanced down at the console, as if it might offer asylum. This equipment is notoriously unreliable when exposed to cross-species variables. I am the equipment, she said lightly. Reading involuntary responses is what my people do. We evolved on a world where hesitation was fatal. Subtle changes meant survival. She leaned forward just enough to trigger 3 separate safety warnings. Yours just told me something fascinating. He swallowed. Somewhere in the ship, a coolant pump kicked on, loud enough to feel like commentary. For the record, he said, humans have a long tradition of finding objectively dangerous things appealing. We put spikes on our vehicles and call them stylish. She laughed, a short sound that made the translator hesitate before deciding it counted as amusement. The rest of the galaxy classifies my anatomy as deeply unsettling. One ambassador fainted during a handshake. That happens to us too, he said, then winced. Not the fainting, the unsettling were very unsettling. The restraint field adjusted again as she relaxed into it, clearly enjoying herself. All my career, she said, I have been the specimen others fear, and now you are distracted. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Is it the strength, the efficiency? Or simply that I look like I could survive a fall that would turn you into paste? He laughed before he could stop himself. It burst out of him, loud and helpless, dissolving the tension like solvent. On Earth, he said, we call that comforting. Her grin softened, surprise flickering through it. The lights resumed their steady rhythm. The ship kept moving, and somewhere between professional protocol and ancient instinct, something quietly, irrevocably changed. The station's public corridor was supposed to be neutral territory. It said so in at least 9 languages on a floating placard that reworded itself depending on who looked at it. Neutral lighting, neutral gravity, neutral temperature. None of it helped when the alien woman stepped out of the lift and half the corridor recalibrated in quiet alarm. The human xenobiologist was already there, pretending to be deeply invested in a wall display explaining emergency evacuation routes he had memorized weeks ago. He did not turn around. He absolutely should have turned around. You're doing it again, her voice said behind him, cheerful and unmistakably amused. He flinched. The display chimed in sympathy, switching languages as if trying to help. Doing what? He asked, still facing the wall. He had decided that if he did not see her, the situation might revert to something manageable, like a fire or vacuum exposure. Your heart rate spiked before I spoke, she said, then dropped when you decided not to look at me. It's a fascinating coping strategy. Ineffective but fascinating. He sighed and turned. I was hoping this corridor was classified as a professional safe zone. It is, she said. That's why I came here. If anyone panics, it's their own fault. A maintenance drone zipped between them, paused, scanned her, then politely reversed direction and left. She watched it go. Your machines are very honest. They take after us, he said. We just lie about it more. They began walking, not together exactly, but in the same direction, the station adjusting gravity under their feet to accommodate both stride patterns without complaint. Around them, other species pretended very hard not to stare. One failed and walked into a bulkhead. I reviewed your species' cultural files, she said casually. Your entertainment is alarming. He smiled despite himself. Let me guess, apex predators with emotional arcs. And explosions, she added. So many explosions, is that courtship behavior? Only on bad first dates. She laughed, the sound drawing more attention than either of them wanted. You realize, she said, that my people have spent centuries being categorized as a biological warning label. And humans collect warning labels, he said. We put them on mugs. They stopped at a viewport. Stars slid past in a way that suggested the station was going somewhere important without asking anyone's opinion. He leaned on the rail, feeling the faint hum of the field generators through his palms. I don't think I'm what you expect, she said more quietly. He considered that. That might be the first reassuring thing you've said. Her grin returned, sharp but warm. Good. Then perhaps next time you are distracted, you will not pretend it's a system error. He groaned. The system logs everything. So do I, she replied lightly. We should compare notes sometime. The corridor lights dimmed for artificial evening. Somewhere, an announcement began in 6 languages and gave up halfway through. The station remained neutral. The universe apparently did not. The conference chamber was designed to prevent incidents. That alone guaranteed one. The human xenobiologist sat at the table, hands folded, posture carefully neutral, while a holographic agenda scrolled past items no one intended to follow. Around him, delegates from half a dozen systems occupied seats shaped for wildly incompatible anatomies. The universal translator struggled heroically, adding polite pauses where none were earned. She arrived late on purpose. The door irised open, paused, thought better of it, then opened wider. Conversation thinned. One delegate made a noise that might have been a greeting or a defensive reflex. Apologies, she said, smiling as she took her seat. The lift and I disagreed about structural tolerances. The chair recalibrated twice before surrendering. The table did not move. Points were scored. The xenobiologist felt eyes on him immediately. Not hers, everyone else's. As if he had personally invited a meteor into the room. A gelatinous envoy leaned toward him, voice lowered. Is she safe? She's seated, he said. That's usually a good sign. The meeting began. It went poorly. Trade routes were discussed. Research exchanges proposed. Someone suggested joint hazard drills and was immediately voted down. Throughout it all, she listened with infuriating patience, occasionally tilting her head in a way that made the translator pause, then resume with more careful phrasing. At some point, she spoke, the room went very quiet. My species is often described as aggressive, she said. This is inaccurate, we are efficient, there is a difference. A murmur rippled. The xenobiologist resisted the urge to nod enthusiastically, which would have been deeply unhelpful. Efficiency, it turned out, included humor. On my world, she continued, we test structural integrity by standing on things. If they break, they were never meant to last. A delegate coughed. Another pretended to check a datapad that was very clearly turned off. The human leaned back and muttered, "We test ours by throwing toddlers at them." She glanced at him, eyes bright. "Your species frightens me more every minute." The tension cracked. Laughter, uneven, uncertain, spread like a controlled burn. The room breathed again. Later, during a recess no one admitted was necessary, she joined him by the refreshment unit. The machine dispensed something glowing and apologized. "You're doing better," she said. "At diplomacy. At not panicking." He accepted the drink. It hissed high praise. "You defended me without defending me," she added. "That is a difficult skill." He shrugged. "I figured if anyone asked, I'd say you're statistically less dangerous than our caffeine." She raised an eyebrow. "That explains so much." An alert chimed softly. The meeting resumed. The galaxy did not collapse. Several assumptions did. As they returned to their seats, she leaned close enough for only him to hear. "You realize they are now more afraid of what you might like than of what I am." He smiled, helpless and human. "We've had that effect before." The agenda scrolled on, ignored. Somewhere between protocols and punchlines, something improbable took root, and the universe, against all expectations, seemed amused. The ship adjusted its trajectory without ceremony, engines murmuring as if reluctant to interrupt the conversation happening in its corridors. That alone felt like progress. The xenobiologist stood in the observation ring, hands resting on the rail, watching the stars smear gently as the vessel slipped into transit. Weeks ago, this space had felt like a workplace, panels, protocols, reminders not to touch anything that touched back. Now it felt inhabited, lived in, slightly dangerous in the way all meaningful things were. "You're thinking too loudly," she said from behind him. He didn't jump this time. That, he decided, was growth. "I'm reviewing the incident reports," he replied. "They now include a category called unexpected mutual curiosity." She joined him, the deck compensating under her weight with practiced respect. "My people would call that a courtship phase." He winced. The committee called it a diplomatic hazard. "Compromise," she said easily. "A diplomatic courtship hazard." He laughed, real and unguarded. Somewhere along the way, embarrassment had stopped being the loudest thing in his head. Curiosity had taken over. Respect followed shortly after, bringing snacks. The Interspecies Council had reached its conclusions faster than anyone expected. Joint research would continue. Cultural exchange protocols were amended. A footnote was added regarding humans and their deeply suspicious attraction metrics. No one asked him to testify again. That felt intentional. "You defended us," she said, watching the stars. "Not by arguing we weren't frightening, but by suggesting fear wasn't the correct response." "I used to think understanding meant distance," he said. "Observe, measure, stay objective." He paused. "Turns out that's just fear with better vocabulary." She considered that. "On my world, we say proximity reveals truth. From far away, everything looks like a threat." The ship chimed softly, announcing arrival in a system dense with light and possibility. He realized he wasn't bracing for impact anymore. "I used to worry," he said, "that noticing you the way I did meant I was unprofessional. And now I think it means I finally noticed someone instead of a category." Her grin was smaller this time, honest. "You are different from when we met." "So are you," he said. "You stopped being a case study." She laughed, dangerous downgrade. They stood there as the ship emerged into open space, stars settling into familiar positions. The future didn't loom, it waited. She extended a hand, not a test, not a challenge, an invitation. He took it